Hey everybody, Black Ninja 797 here, and welcome back to another video, guys. In today's video, we are going to be ranking the final season of Telltale Games, The Walking Dead. I am super excited to do this because this is going to be our last ranking video for, at least in terms of the characters. If you guys definitely want to see more, then please end up smashing a like. I'd be more than happy to do so. I still enjoy the series, and I think this is actually one of our series that has got a lot of staying power, so let me know if you want to see more. But yeah, guys, the reason why I'm uploading this video today is not only just because this is the last episode of the characters ranking part of The Walking Dead, but however, though, also today as well is the release date of the Clementine comics, so I want to end up doing this right before, just so that way we had a lot of hype and kind of like a little bit of re-jogging everyone's memory about how the series has gone so far. And that way, when we read the comics, which I intend to end up making a video series, if you guys want me to do so, that way we know what's going on. So yeah, guys, I am so looking forward to reading the Clementine comics, because Clementine is, as you guys know, one of my favorite video game characters of all time. This is one of my favorite series of all time, and I'm just looking forward to seeing the story continue. Skybound Telltale, please, for the love of God, do not end up ruining the perfect ending of Season 4. But yeah, guys, let's rank all the Season 4 or final season characters of The Walking Dead. Alrighty, guys, so for these very first few spots, I'm just going to be literally putting all the characters back to back to back to back, at least for these initial sets, because these characters are the characters that you see for literally one encounter, and it's not even guaranteed because it's dependent on player choice. So this is going to end up being Helen, Lloyd, Rodney, and then you got Dorian, then there's Sullen, Gina, Gad, Michael, Armando, and finally Jonathan. These characters are all just Delta soldiers, or they're people that were from the ranch, and they have literally no significance. You will see them for like one part. Hell, you don't even know their names unless you end up going the way that I did, where you actually end up going to the Walking Dead fandom website. And in fact, this is the only way I was even able to find out about some of these characters. Like, literally, there were some characters I was like, who the hell are even you? Like, there's some characters that, like, I've never seen, or there's just some characters that I've, like, only seen just the once that I literally consider them just, like, not even, like, characters. They're just background or filler. And so, I don't really honestly care about these characters enough to rank them. I'm going to be 100% honest. They have nothing sustainable about them, and there's nothing, I don't know who they are. I don't know what significance they bring to the story other than the fact that they're just either on the bad guy's side, or that they're, like, literally for one encounter. And in fact, all of these guys that end up being in these slots are a part of either groups that try to screw you over, or are just a part of bad groups in general. So, I mean, I honestly don't necessarily want to rank them high, so I decided to clump them all at the bottom. If you want to read any of their bios, or figure out where you find them, I will put them all up on the screen as I've been talking over the last couple of seconds here. Now, there is one character, though, that is in the form of a flashback that actually is worth a damn, even though you only see him just the once. And I have actually ranked him before, and this is going to actually, believe it or not, be Eddie from 400 Days, back in Season 1. This is actually gameplay from when I was playing the final episode and the flashback at the ranch. And Clementine ends up killing him, but if you want to see a photo of his old self and his new self side by side, here it is on the screen for comparison's sake. Alright, so the first character that we have in here that's actually worth a damn is going to end up being one of our main group members, and this is going to end up being Willy. Willy is the little kid that is basically around like 10's age, and he's the guy that you end up getting to know as kind of like the weird kid. I mean, he's kind of like that one awkward, like, or socially inept kid. However, though, he is likable in some instances, at least when he's acting normal and not talking about his masturbation addiction, which you guys don't remember that. That was a joke that Telltale slipped in there. They just had to make a dick joke. But, yeah, so, I mean, he's not the best character in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but at least he's tolerable. They could have made him just, like, an absolutely infuriating character and just really annoying, kind of like just a brat kid. But, however, though, he is, in certain instances, actually quite okay. Not good, but just okay. Okay, now we've got Marlin. Now, Marlin is one of those characters that, if they really want to, they could have made him a completely opposite character than they actually had him be. Now, even though this never officially happened, and even though The Walking Dead Season 4, the final season, is by all means extremely really good, if they wanted to have fun with it, they could have also done a different thing with the story, where instead of, like, let's say, AJ kills Marlin in the first episode like they have it officially, they could have done something cool where Marlin either gets shot and lives, or was threatened to leave by AJ, and he actually ends up joining the Delta, or something happens where we gotta rescue him from the Delta. One of those two outcomes would have also been, I feel like, just as good, but they did set it up for the good or bad AJ plot they were trying to portray within the last season. So Marlin was one of those stepping stones that was for that type of plot, and so I understand where they were going with it, but I don't know, I just feel like they could have done something different with Marlin. Okay, so now we've got Abel. Abel is the only Delta member, other than, like, Minerva and Lily, that's really even worth noting, because he does have significance within the story. You do see him multiple times, he is a threat to you, and in fact, I'd say he's actually quite a good bad guy. I mean, honestly, Abel is one of those characters that you might just look at from the outside and just be like, oh, he just looks just like any generic bad guy, but if you attach to the series as much as all the other Walking Dead fans out there, Abel is a threat. In fact, there is times where, like, I was actually playing the game, and I was uncomfortable being around him, because he just has that really weird, like, culty vibe about him, where he, like, listens to the orders of the Delta, and he is controlled and whatever, but if he wants to, he can go nuts. Because, I mean, really think about it, like, there's so many Delta members that lasted, like, 30 seconds, and were just basically just unimportant. And he was the only other one, other than, like, two, that was a threat, in my humble opinion. Abel was the type of guy that wasn't necessarily meant to end up being the main enemy, but he definitely was a side enemy for sure. So now we've got Lily, and originally my first portrayal of Lily was that she was a character that ended up being a bad guy, but really could have easily ended up being a good guy. And in the season 4, the final season, she's almost the exact polar opposite for me. In season 1, I always tried to see the good in Lily, because that was just me as a guy. I mean, I didn't want to make enemies, I don't want to try to make enemies, I don't try to vilify people because they wronged me once. But the way that they portray Lily in the final season is a good portrayal, because it shows her in this downward spiral that shows her being engulfed into her, basically her dad's ideology. Or if you remember Larry, Larry being from season 1, Lily's dad, Larry was horrible, like, absolutely horrible, and basically what happens is that from when we last see Lily to where we see her now, she transforms into her dad. I mean, literally, she is almost the living embodiment of her dad. And so, because I didn't like Larry at all, like, I literally say that this version of Lily is horrible. It makes her a good bad guy, it most certainly does, and does contribute to the character development, but that doesn't mean I have to like her at all. I do not like the Season 4 Lily. The only thing I have, like, going for her that's somewhat remotely good is the fact that she used to be good, at least to a certain extent. Now, this particular pick, is going to be very important, because, honestly, I think this character is underrated. This is Minerva, or Minnie. She is one of those characters that genuinely creeps me out. Especially in her last moments where she's alive, where she's bitten and turning into a zombie and trying to kill everyone last second and attempts to get her brother Tennessee back. And oh my god, the betrayal that they make of her in this last scene that we ever see her in is really good. It was great storytelling on the point of Skybound and Telltale. They made this scene genuinely creepy. As an adult, this still creeps me out. I mean, I played Season 4 back when it first came out when I was around, like, 18, so I was barely an adult. But, dude, even at 21 and playing this already before and seeing this before, it's still creepy. Like, it's, like, enough to make your skin want to crawl. Like, there's something really disturbing about, like, someone that you thought was dead that, like, just comes back singing from the forest, all bitten and zombified, wielding a bloody axe, trying to act all nice to get her brother, the person that you've befriended over the last couple of days in the game, back. And now there's zombies everywhere, there's just shit going down. They portrayed her character really well, and honestly, she's a better villain than Lily is. Okay, now we've got Omar. Omar is one of the characters that survives to the very end, but unfortunately, though, other than getting kidnapped, he really doesn't contribute much. I mean, you get to know him a little bit at the beginning of the game, but that's pretty much it. I'm sorry, but he is kind of a flat character. So now we've got Mitch. Mitch is one of those characters that's like middle of the road. He's not exactly a character I like. He's not a character I dislike either. I feel like the characters can end up being like I like them, I don't like them, and even middle, but not necessarily like in a neutral way where they're flat. It's like almost kind of like I just don't care enough. Mitch is one of those characters where I'm like, okay, you have some aspects about you that are cool, and you're like an episode or two, but you really are nothing more than a side character. You're more than a filler character, but you're definitely just a side character. I like Mitch in some ways. Sometimes he's also a dick. But the good news is, though, is that at least gives him character development by rotating back and forth, and that's just okay. Alright, up next now is Asim. Now, Asim, if they really want to, could have made him a more focal character. The most significant events, though, that I can list off the top of my head, however, though, is that you end up getting to know him the very beginning of the game. You get to see him get kidnapped, because he's one of the characters that will always get kidnapped by the raid that happens in the later part of the season. And he also ends up being a part of the, conversations at the beginning when you first get to know everybody, like, on a friendly level, like where you're playing games with each other and all that stuff. And he is one of also those characters that survives to the end once again. I would like to believe that when the Clementine comics come out, unless the character is determinant, any of the guaranteed characters will have some involvement in some sort of way again, and especially Asim, because Asim would have been like a recent character since it's just a direct follow-up, I believe, from the last season with the comic. And Asim, I think that they could have done better with him, because there's not exactly bad qualities about him. In fact, I actually think he, in some regards, was quite good. But that's really my biggest complaint. If good is my biggest complaint, then Telltale did definitely do something right. But it could have been great, you know? Alright, now we've got Ruby. Ruby, I didn't like at first. I'm gonna be honest. Like, because her first impression is that, she's, bitching about how AJ ends up biting her finger. Now, although I will give her the benefit of the doubt that, yes, it might end up being actually AJ's fault. We were just taken in, we should be thankful and all that stuff. But I literally just have it where, like, I'm playing as Clementine, right? And I just wake up and I'm potentially almost possibly dead. And my first greeting is not even a hello. It's just being like, your child bit me. It's just being like, okay. And I have a head injury. Hello? Good morning? Like, what am I supposed to say to that? Like, is that how you start off conversations? But trust me, she gets a lot better. In fact, quite likable, actually. Past the Sim and past Omar and all those guys, Ruby was one of those characters that did get more on-screen time. She never was in any battles or anything. She always was at the home front, but she did contribute. She did end up becoming a better person and more likable once we got to know her. And I do hope the best for her, because she was once again one of those characters that just made it to the end of the game. So this may surprise you, but I'm actually going to be putting Brody up here next on the list. And Brody, I am going to be ranking her, I would say a fair mixture of both who she was and also what she could have been. Even though she only ever was in one episode and she ends up dying just as fast as Marlin, you only end up get to see her for just a little bit. She seemed like a likable character. I liked her. I got a good vibe off of Brody. I don't know what you would have been able to do differently about the story to have it kind of have the same impact, but allow her to live. But it would have been cool if she would have lived, because she wasn't a character that was really bad. Quite good. I mean, like I said, I'm basing it off of what she could have been, but I really just overall like her vibe, and I just thought she deserved better. So now we start to get into the characters that I personally really love, and I would say this is more of like the fan favorites. Up next is Ten/Tennessee. I like Ten. Ten was really enjoyable for me to end up playing with, because Ten was the beacon of hope that I would say was a part of the main group, and I'm glad that he was able to live in my story. But the problem is, though, is that he's determinant. If you don't know what I keep meaning by when I say determinant, he is one of the only few characters that was in with the final season where his death is not a guarantee. He can die, but in my ending, he did not die. In fact, in any of my playthroughs, he did not die. Now, when you do play, though, in such a way that he can die, the ending is actually quite sad and dark, because originally I did not know this, but the way that his ending is, unless there's some other ending I just don't know about, because I only looked up so many endings, because in case I ever want to play the game again, have it be a surprise. the way it looks like is that when you're on the bridge and Minerva is attacking you, and, you know, everything looks like it starts getting to the end, and normally, and this is spoiler alert, but normally what happens for a lot of people, I like to believe, is that either your romance, which is either Lewis or Violet, ends up dying, but you also have another option, which is Ten ends up dying on the bridge, and this results in whether or not that you trust AJ to make decisions on his own. If you do not trust him, he will hesitate to shoot, therefore letting Lewis and or Violet die. Or, if you trust AJ to start making decisions on his own, what happens is that to save your interest, which in this case is Lewis or Violet, AJ shoots Tennessee. He will, like, legitimately murder Tennessee to save someone else. And that's one of those types of calls or decisions that would be something that I would never want to see from a little kid like AJ. And that's why I didn't trust him, because AJ's still a kid. He's only 6 years old. And so I'm glad that he doesn't end up shooting his friend that he obviously becomes very close to in my story, because Ten's a good friend figure, or brother figure even, for AJ, since AJ's only family basically is Clementine in the beginning. That, you know, that's who he knows all of his life. I just really hope that if they were ever to end up implementing Ten again, that it's in a good way, because his ending, if you get the bad one in my opinion, which is his death, is quite sad. But I still like Ten though, and I'm glad that he was within the story. Alright, now we have got Violet. Now, originally in my very first playthrough, the one that you guys didn't see, like, because I played all the Walking Dead games previously when they first came out on my own before I ever started making the walkthroughs on them. The first romance that I had was actually with Violet. Now, for me in particular, I don't happen to end up being gay, but I don't have a problem with anybody that happens to be gay or lesbian or anything. The way I was looking at it is that I wasn't trying to necessarily ship them because I, you know, happen to be gay or whatever. I just shipped them just because I thought that Violet was a cool person and would just be a good fit for Clementine at the time over Lewis. And so I was just like, screw it, I'm just going to make Clementine gay. So I made her gay, and I had her romance Violet. And the romance angle of Violet, I would say, is just as fun and enjoyable as the Lewis romance angle. But on my second playthrough, I actually did Lewis instead, and I much prefer the Lewis arc, in my opinion. Before, I really didn't care for Lewis, but now I'd say I prefer him, honestly, over Violet, but they're still both enjoyable characters. So you either like or you do not like James, because this is going to be the next character on the list. I put James personally quite high. James is one of those types of characters that balances really, really well within the story. There's character development with him, but there's a lot of mystery too because of his backstory, and if you read the comics, you know that he was a part of, like, one of the most infamous, like, groups in all The Walking Dead, the Whisperers. And so there's a lot of interest in that for me right away, because I've done, you know, the comics before, I've read them, and I know how the story goes. And the story is in the same universe as the game, so that was also kind of a cool parallel and a crossover. Now, James's ending, depending on what you do, I feel is bittersweet, because you can either choose to have AJ kill or not kill Lily as one of the last major decisions on whether or not that you're going to end up having a good James or a bad James. If AJ kills Lily, James will actually end up looking at you as an enemy and irresponsible, taking care of him, because one of the things he asks you to do is to not let AJ become a killer. But if you let Lily live, Lily will immediately kill James, resulting in his death. So it's a bittersweet ending where either you end up befriending him and he dies, or he becomes your enemy and he lives. It's really up to player choice. There's really no perfect ending with James, but I think he had a very nice yin and yang balance about him. So this one has been a long time coming. So guys, we are now finally going to be ranking AJ. AJ has been in the games since Season 2. And I have ranked him ever since Season 2. But the thing is, though, is with AJ, is that in Season 2, he was just born and was an infant. In Season 3, he had really no impact quite yet because he was still a little kid and was barely able to speak. But now he's 6 years old in the final season, and he can talk, he can walk, he can do things on his own, and he is a fully functional and developed character. But he's still a kid. And the whole entire plot about this last season was to make the game essentially come full circle, where how that Lee taught Clementine how to survive, now Clementine is teaching AJ how to survive. And that is very noticeable right away. But there's also a little bit of a twist here. In comparison to Season 1, in Season 4, they really make your choices matter. And I say that genuinely, because, like, Telltale games are known for kind of having choices not really matter at the end of the day, but I think otherwise, at least with this game and this season. Because they really make it so that way whatever choices that you do, whatever action, whatever nano decision that you do, affects AJ. AJ will remember every little thing you do, and he studies and learns, and he copies you. So if you are a bad person, he will become evil. If you are a good person, he will end up staying a good kid. It is 100% player dependent, whether or not that you get a good ending or a bad ending with AJ. Now, yes, I understand there's some stuff that's guaranteed, for example, such as, you know, the way that Clementine's story unfolds. Clementine doesn't actually die. She's guaranteed to live. AJ will save her. But there is some decisions that are really good and really bad. Like, for example, a bad outcome that I can think with AJ right away, depending on how you raise him, is that he kills Tennessee. That was pretty cold and pretty dark. But another good decision that he ends up making that's actually quite sweet is that he actually tries to save everybody. Like, he tries to keep everyone alive. He respects James, even though he's kind of like the oddball out. He tries to end up saving everybody by seeking the help and advice from Clementine. He looks to you for guidance, whether or not that he's supposed to kill people, such as killing Lily towards the end of the game. And it's all on you as a player. He is very, very fun to play as also, too, at the very end. And I'd say that AJ, at the end of the day, is really a solid character. So now, guys, we're on to the last two characters, and I actually want to put number 2 as Lewis. It's kind of funny. Originally, before, I would not have done this. In fact, I actually would have probably ranked him quite low. But playing this again, I really did like playing with Lewis. Like, Lewis is a character that you have to play with in the story arc to truly get to appreciate him. And normally when I end up doing these, like, linear games, it might be a long time before I end up doing, you know, alternate playthroughs. So I base these a lot of the time off my first impressions. But when I played with you guys, I decided that, hey, I'm going to end up picking the Lewis path in comparison to Violet. I romanced Lewis. I played a lot with Lewis. I saved Lewis. And Lewis is really funny. He's he's goofy. He's likable. That's funny. The things I didn't like him for are actually the things that I did end up liking him for. And I put him at the number 2 spot. I mean, he's even better than AJ, in my opinion. AJ's a good kid, don't get me wrong, but Lewis as a character is much more developed. You know, he's got a lot more potential because he's been around longer, he's older. It just sucks, though, that his death is determinant because now there's no canon ending to him being alive. You know, it's dependent on your player choice. So unless, you know, Telltale or Skybound wants to make it where one of the endings is not canon, or, you know, they want to make it where, for example, that Lewis could be alive in one arc and then dead in the other arc, and they want to make both canon, you know, which would be a lot harder to develop for. Lewis is just one of those characters that's just going to be only remembered for what he was in the game. And regardless of whether or not he's dead, or regardless of whether or not that you see him, he was a really good character and had a lot of good screen time, a lot of good character development, and overall, he's just a good person. He really, really, honest to God, was a good person, and he deserved much better than the death he got. I wish he was a character that lived all the way to the very end, but that is where character development with AJ in particular comes into play. But yeah, guys, I really like Lewis. And finally, guys, our number 1 character, my favorite video game character of all time, it's going to end up being Clementine. Clementine is by all time the best character in all of The Walking Dead, and all of the Walking Dead video games, and without a doubt, one of the best video game characters in all of video game history. I am so excited, and I'm so happy that they're continuing her story, because I thought that after the games, you know, being done with, like, Telltale and, like, Skybound barely being able to finish it, but thank God they did. I'm so glad we did get the ending that we did. I was worried that we'd never end up seeing anything from Clementine again, and I'm so glad that now we get to be able to continue her story via the comics. The only thing that I do worry about, though, is just because, you know, now that the games are done, but the story continues via the comics, I am reasonably, fairly worried, but just as equally as excited, but worried that they might end up ruining her story, because now we don't end up having it where the last time we see her is with the Season 4, the final season ending, where it basically was perfect. You know, it was wrapped up with a nice big bow, Clementine lived, and it was really nice. But now with the story continuing, obviously there's room for possibly things to get worse. But I have a lot of faith in Telltale. I have a lot of faith in Skybound. And who knows, maybe the story might end up being better than the ending that we got. That would be really awesome to see. You know, maybe we might see some old fan favorites. Maybe we might see something really, really cool happen. Who knows? Maybe we might have some more epic stories with Clementine for years to come. But I truly hope you guys end up enjoying today's video, guys. This has been ranking all the Walking Dead characters throughout the whole entire Walking Dead series. If you guys end up enjoying, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Look forward to the series now. We're going to be reading the Walking Dead Clementine comics. But I hope you enjoyed another YouTube video for the most unique YouTuber you guys are ever going to see. Thank you for watching, guys, and peace out. And remember, still not bitten.